Hi, my name is Paul Barbaro and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of IPA Australia. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands upon which we meet and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Firstly, I'd like to welcome you all to IPA's Diversity and Inclusion's 2021 International Women's Day event. This event is really important to me for two reasons. Personally, I'm the father of two fiercely independent young women who are forging their way in a world that has been made infinitely easier for them by virtue of a lot of the work that has been done by women in the past. And secondly, because every one of the colleagues I work with directly are female. Each of them make a significant contribution in the regions in which they work, and all of them collectively produce a result for IPA, and albeit that I'm biased, amongst the best in the country. So today's event is about you, but it's also about us, about our opportunity of making the world a better place for generations to come. It's not intended to sound cheesy, it's a fact. A lot of people have done a lot of work to make our world a better place, but together, collectively, we can make it even better for generations to come, where it is genuinely equitable for young women and young men to work collaboratively together in an equitable place. So on behalf of IPA, can I extend to all of you a very happy International Women's Day.
Hi, I'm Kate Baxter, IPA's National Diversity Manager, and we're here today to talk about some really interesting topics that are close to my heart and topics that call out gender bias and inequality, not just at work, but in our community. I'm a mum of 3 young children, and I'm taking the challenge to help pave the way for our next generation through education and conversation. The theme for International Women's Day is to choose to challenge, and I'm thrilled to see so many of you all here today to partake in these discussions and to take the challenge and to celebrate women. Thank you. It's my great pleasure to welcome my friend Corrine Hall. Best known for her batting accomplishments, playing for Women's National Cricket League for Tasmania and Wirral and Women's Big Bash League for the Hobart Hurricanes. Corrine has paved her way through sport. Her talents were quickly noticed when she won the 2004-2005 Cricket New South Wales Female Rising Star Award, and at the ripe old age of 30 was named Hobart Hurricanes captain for the WBBL. Corrine is also co-author and illustrator of Victress, a book that highlights and celebrates women in sport. Corrine takes the reader down a path that is not only inspirational, but invokes feelings of immense pride for what Australian women athletes have achieved. A must-read for Australia's youth, showcasing you can be whatever or whoever you do want to be. A genuine person who believes in the goodness of people, a lover of art, elephant conservation and travelling. I welcome Corrine Hall.
Thanks for having me, Kate. That's an amazing intro. I hope I can live up to that.
Corrine, what I loved so much about Victress was your overarching themes of success. These aligned incredibly closely with IPA's own values. That of love your work, take the lead, be the difference, and own it. I'm keen to explore this more, and we'll be basing a lot of our conversations around these values today.
Yeah, absolutely. Victress for me was a personal passion project. We're going through a Big Bash season. We weren't performing the way we should be, and as a senior player, I should have been, leading the way with that, and I wasn't. And after one game, I was getting quite down on myself, and I remember my mindset quickly shifted, and I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude for being able to play the sport I love as my job. And it got me thinking about all the women who had paved the way before me and allowed me to have that opportunity that I had today. And I started drawing Dawn Fraser, who I think is the matriarch of Australian women's sport. And then I wrote down 100 other athletes, female athletes that I wanted to draw. My manager and my best friend got wind of what I was doing, and they had the blue sky idea of getting the book published or getting the art published. And we aligned ourselves with Cricket Australia, who sponsored the publishing, and Victress is what she is today.
Let's talk about leadership. There is a common theme with the 100 women you've highlighted in Victress' book, and that is leadership. How have you gotten to this stage in your career, and who have you learnt from?
I guess for me, I'm a shy, quite introverted person, and I never had ambitions to take on a leadership role, but my coach saw qualities in me that I guess made people follow me. So I think the challenge for me was trusting that she saw those qualities and that I could be a strong leader, even though I myself probably don't have the stereotypical qualities you'd think of a strong leader. I'm probably the opposite, but I think we've seen leadership redefined, not just through the sporting field, but through people like Jacinda Ardern, who are showing you can be an effective leader who creates a lot of change.
Pay equality continues to be a subject that plagues women in work. Data shows us Australia's national gender pay gap is at 14%, meaning across all industries and occupations in Australia, men's average weekly earnings is 14% greater than women's. So Corrine, how has this pay equality affected you and your teammates?
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate enough to see the full professionalism of women's cricket. When I first started, we were selling raffle tickets to pay for our own travel and tracksuits, and now we're at a point where we can support ourselves to a point. But we're still considered now full-time athletes. We train all year round. We have a couple of months off each year, and we only get paid at probably a casual to at best part-time rate. So there is a huge way to go. I think Cricket Australia has set the standard in the way they're treating their international athletes. So the Australian women's cricket team get paid very well now, and now their focus is to transfer that down to domestic female cricketers. So we don't have to have a job to supplement our income throughout the year, and we can fully focus on being the best cricketer we can be.
Thank you so much, and welcome to IPA's celebration of International Women's Day. Paul, a huge thank you for you for opening our event. And before I introduce our panel, I just would like to pay respects to the Kulin Nation elders, pay my respects to the traditional owners on the land on which I am on today. So thank you so very much. We have a great session planned today, guys, with expert speakers from a range of different backgrounds and stages in their lives. And I'm so thrilled to have such a diverse panel and for you to all give me your time. So thank you so much. To our guests, thank you for joining us today. We're really humbled to see the volume of people interested, and we really want you to be involved. So can you use the QA function down the bottom if you've got any thoughts, you've got some questions for the panel, if you want to share your experiences. We'll do our very best to answer to you guys live, but if we can't, let us know who you want to hear from and the panelists will come back to you at a later date. So let's get on with the show. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Anne Crary, National Manager of Property Services at Little Real Estate. Anne has over 20 years experience within the real estate industry across Australia and the UK. She currently supports over 200 employees through her national portfolio, whilst raising a gorgeous little 3-year-old boy. Anne is literally juggling it all and is currently on holidays in Noosa, so a special thank you and a welcome to a great friend of mine, Anne.
Thank you.
We also have Christine Cinderley with us today, the Managing Director at Wangara Mara Consulting. Her career extends over a couple of decades to both private and public sectors. For the past 5 years, she has run her own consulting firm, helping Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses launch and be successful. A soul to the earth and a genuine good person, I'm very grateful to have Christine not only with us today, but as a mentor to me and my team. Thank you, Christine. We have Danielle Snell as well with us today, the co-founder and principal at Allet Lawyers by McCurve and Snell. It does have a really nice sound to it, Danielle. Danielle is one of Victoria's star litigators. She has worked at several top law firms and on many high-profile cases. Now the co-founder and principal of her own law firm, an advocate for diversity, inclusion and equality. You'll see Danielle giving her all to create a very safe world for us and standing up for what she believes in. A mum of 2 beautiful children and an inspiration to me. I welcome you, Danielle, to the panel.
Thank you, Kate.
And last but absolutely not least, we have Kath Koshel. She is the founder of The Kindness Factory, a global not-for-profit organisation and movement which inspires people to reach for the stars. A former professional cricketer and Ironman competitor who has defeated the odds on a number of occasions. A great friend of Corrine Hall's and now by default mine, I'm absolutely thrilled to have Kath here today. Welcome to you all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So let's get the panel started. We've got a question from Tori Best around the subject of leadership. So I'll refer to Tori now.
Hi, Corrine. Thank you for this opportunity and for your invaluable contribution for bringing the discussion of women in sport to the forefront. Firstly, I'd like to say congratulations on Victress. What an amazing achievement. Your passion and enthusiasm, not only for women's cricket, but for all women involved in sport, is inspiring. My question for you today is on leadership, something that I'm very passionate about myself, and the significance that strong leadership plays across both the commercial and sporting worlds. In lieu of me writing my own book on effective leadership, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on how we can continue to share the stories of successful women throughout our communities and networks. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question, Tori. I think the first part of leadership is owning up to your mistakes, and I think that was my error from the video just then. I accidentally pressed my mute button, so I apologise, everyone. That was my fault. But back to your question, Tori, I think women across all industries are often, through no fault of their own, pitted against each other, whether that's in the sporting world, when your sort of personality and your look is compared to other athletes in terms of your commercial marketability, or whether in the business world you're vying for a senior role in a very limited number of roles for women. So I think it's really easy to be threatened by one another, but it's really powerful when that's flipped on its head and we start championing one another. And I think for me, my experience through cricket, and especially through producing Victress, the book, that's been ever present. I had to contact all the athletes involved in the book, and not one of them asked for anything in return. They were so thrilled to be a part of celebrating women and women in sport. And I think a good example of that was Dawn Fraser actually flew in from Berlin to Sydney on the day of the launch just because she wanted to be there. It wasn't because Victress was a piece of literature genius, although it is quite good. But she just feels a sense of responsibility to have a real big voice in every opportunity she has to celebrate women. And I think there's two things we can do in our everyday lives, and one is that, support, encourage, and celebrate each other. And I think the other thing is not let your modesty or humility stop you from owning your success, because that often gives other women permission to celebrate their own successes too.
Corrine, I love that. I love every piece of that, and I absolutely agree with your comments there. Kath, I've got a question for you. I suppose in Corrine's book, Victress, your story most likely, more than others, moved me to tears. I suppose the injuries that you endured were one thing, but it was really the recovery and how you decided to pull yourself back up and to approach your recovery, I found was not only courageous, showed significant emotional intelligence, but showed such optimism, which is something that I really align myself to. So from there, kindness became a significant part of your everyday practices. So I'm really interested in hearing from you. What's your ethos in celebrating success, not just for yourself, but for your peers?
I think probably similar to Corine's point, and I'll speak to that as a live example, because she was certainly someone who I lent on enormously throughout every single one of my recoveries. And we've never really done anything like this together, Corrine or I, and it's hard when you're speaking to a topic that's so relevant to your own life in front of people in celebration of a book that she's done. So thank you very much for that opportunity. When I guess firstly on kindness and how I recognise that to be, I guess, an important tool for me to recover. When you're in a wheelchair like I have been, and you can't reach the lift button because it's poorly designed or whatever may have happened, and a random stranger walks past and they can see that struggle and they press that button for you. Like, it meant absolutely nothing to their day, but it meant everything to yours because it allowed you to carry on with your day. Those are the moments that really stood out to me. So there were acts of kindness that people could do for me that I could lean into or draw upon. But then certainly it was the people within my life, and most of them predominantly women. So my two best friends, Erin Burns and Corrine Hall, who I was able to draw strength from them when I couldn't find it within myself. So as an example, I've broken my back on 2 separate occasions After the first time, I spent 12 months in rehabilitation, trying to teach myself how to walk again when everyone told me that I couldn't. I recovered from that well enough to be able to complete an Ironman. I did that, and then I broke my back again when hit by a drunk driver from behind. And a lot of people drew strength from my story because they saw it as inspirational. I didn't at the time. The second time when I broke my back, I was facing multiple injuries, and I was lying there in traction, flat on my back, wondering how on earth I'd find that strength again. And it was just genuinely through people. So when I couldn't find that strength within myself, I just drew on other people within my life, their kindness, their resilience, their mental fortitude as well, to be able to give me that strength when I couldn't believe in myself. So in terms of empowerment and how powerful that can be to a person, not just when they're in a struggle, but also when they're just floating along with life, or they may need that inspiration to go and start a new business or write a new book or do whatever it is. I think that's so important to find that in other people. So to have people who can have your back when you can't have your own, I think that's vitally important in any area of life, whether we're overcoming obstacles or adversity, or whether we're just simply being and trying to dream big and start something new. So yeah, I'd echo Crini's statements wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah, thanks, Kath. And as I said, your story is one that doesn't come around very often, but I completely agree with your sentiments. I think you are the people that you're around, and gathering a flock of birds or a crew of women that can support you certainly makes your life bigger and better by doing so. And a question for you, and I've watched Little Real Estate and your growth over the last 3 years, and I've seen your financial growth due to some of your leadership style. I imagine trust plays a vital role in how you build and lead a division the way that you're doing. Can you share with us how you've built a culture of trust amongst your team and peers?
So firstly, I believe that when we promote or externally hire team members or leaders, the trust has to actually be there in the beginning, because you're never going to hire or promote somebody who you don't trust. That doesn't make any sense. So I guess I see my role to be a service to my team. So my expectation with my team is that they're honest and open with where they're at, and so I can provide guidance and support where required. I'm there to coach them, not judge them. I trust my team's intentions, and I encourage productive conflict. So when you're all committed to have a high functioning team and we're all accountable, it produces the results.
Yeah, I agree. Brene Brown has an interesting book, particularly around vulnerability, as well as the rumbles in the office, you know, really coming to those conversations confidently, respectfully, but talking through. So, you know, trust is a vital part that goes along with communication.
As is vulnerability.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. We've got another question in regards to pay equality, and I've asked the brilliant Teresa Latta from our IPA Perth branch to direct this question. Danielle, I think this is for you, so I'll get ready to listen to the question and we'll revert to you as we come back.
Hi, my name's Teresa Latta, and I'm the Business Manager for IPA in WA. So today I'd like to talk about the subject of pay equality. As recruiters, we regularly have to discuss the issues of pay equality day in, day out, year on year. We go above and beyond to ensure our candidates get the best opportunities when looking for their next career move. So, are there sectors or industries where the equality of pay is improving? And if so, can we learn from those industries who are challenging the status quo?
I can answer that. So interestingly, the Workplace Gender and Equality Agency released a report only last week, I believe, on the 25th of February, and it recorded that the pay gap, the gender pay gap, had actually reduced from 14% to 13.4%. So that is encouraging, because we've obviously seen that the pay gap has shrunk by, say, 0.6%. It's not to say, though, that there's not more work to do in the area. The results of that report recorded that, in fact, retail and public administration and safety areas were the leading industries. They recorded only sort of 6% to 8% pay gaps between males and females. But the sectors that had the largest pay gaps, which is sort of unsurprising. I'm sure there's many people in the audience today from the sectors I'm about to identify are sort of professional services sector, technical services, scientific services, also the finance and insurance industry. They're looking at the pay gaps in those industries. We're still looking at about sort of 23% pay gaps. And so just from a legal perspective, which I can provide, the primary piece of legislation governing this area is the Fair Work Act. And that effectively makes it unlawful to discriminate against employees on the basis of sex. Not many people recognise that under the Fair Work Act, the Fair Work Commission can actually make what are called equal remuneration orders that will require certain employees to be given equal remuneration for work that's of equal or comparable value. I mean, that is only fair. And so what we're finding is the sectors that are really leading the way in terms of equality in pay, what I think they seem to be doing is they're actually looking at the underlying reasons why the gender pay gap exists. And so what are those reasons? Those reasons are, discrimination and bias in terms of hiring and pay packages. And no, it's no surprise that women obviously need to take time out of the workforce to go and have babies, etc. And so when they come back in, there's this issue of part-time part-time work, and also lack of flexibility in the workplace for women. And so the sectors that are leading the way are looking at these things and going, oh, well, what can we do to improve the situation? And they're doing things like initiatives and policies within organisations that are constantly reviewing the remunerations and recruitment processes, and looking at parental leave policies that offer a sort of a smoother transition for women and minimise disruptions to a woman's career as much as possible when they do need to leave the workforce. But the real one that I find the most interesting is workplace flexibility. And I think the COVID pandemic has really shed light on this issue and really amplified employees' responsibility to provide more flexible workplaces for women. And there's no doubt there's a UN women's report that was released last year in October that showed that women, unfortunately, when the COVID pandemic hit, we are still doing the lion's share of the domestic duties and caregiving, etc. But what I love is the fact that we can all work from anywhere now, and does the concept of 9 to 5 still is it going to exist anymore? I mean, men have become, because of the COVID pandemic, lots of dads were working from home. They became more socialised. They were contributing more to the caregiving and household duties. And so with that then become there's more of a division of labour in the household and a greater sense of flexibility for women in their work practices. And so, despite the catastrophic effects of COVID, I'm really keen to see sort of the longer term effects, and I'm hopeful that it will improve the pay gap and it will allow women a much greater sense of flexibility in their work that can mean that why should there shouldn't be any differences. Women can work when they want, how they want, and can contribute as much as their male counterpart.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. And it's really great to hear that the pay gap has dropped. But interesting call out that a significant amount of the industries that aren't doing as well as other are still very male orientated. So there's a lot of work for us to do to continue to feel our value and our worth in those sectors and to create space. So thanks so much for your feedback, Danielle. I really appreciate it. Christine, I'd like to just quickly ask you, this must be a continual conversation for you as you're consulting, to your clients as to what is a good price to pitch themselves at, and how does that fit, whether it be a consulting side of it or an hourly rate. What's your advice to your clients around pitching themselves at the right price?
Thanks, Kath, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. For me, it's really interesting. I mean, just reflecting on what other people have said, I actually work a lot more with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women who are looking to become entrepreneurs, who are looking to get out and be competitive in relation to what they're doing. So first and foremost, it is about, depending on what their business is about, it's about being commercially competitive. And it's something that you would say to anybody, at the end of the day, you have to be commercially competitive in regards to what you do. It's also really important to understand the industry that they're operating in, and also understand your competitors and who you see as competitors out there. So they're usually part of the conversation that I have with people, as well as focusing, and I think for a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women that I'm working with particularly, it's focused on your point of difference. And I mean, the messaging that I'm giving is clearly not just for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, but this is for women in general. Focus on your point of difference. What is it that you can bring that you believe that others don't? And I've got, that just brings me to thinking about a couple of clients that I'm currently working with, and they're absolutely doing that. There are other people doing the training and delivering it nationwide. But I've said to them, no, I don't want you to be down the bottom here in regards to working more so with community. Yes, give back to community, but focus on flying, go higher. And that's definitely, when they walk out of my sessions, and I'm not trying to give myself a plug here, but when they do, the receptionist usually says to me, oh my God, it's like they've come to see a doctor, because they're walking out feeling like everything is okay. And I guess it's about knowing that they're not alone in that process. So for me, it really is, those things that I mentioned, but it's also talk about, and I think that's something that we as women maybe don't do, talk about why you are in business and what does that mean to you? Because sometimes, and I'm just listening to what Kath said earlier, those things resonate with other people. And so we need to sometimes talk about those things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kristen, I think you touched on something really, really important, is that belief. And I talk about it in a couple of questions around it, is belief and confidence in our own being. And sometimes we don't have it. And sometimes it's this collection of people around us. And I look at the four faces I have in front of me that tell me that I can do and I can believe, and then I trust in that. So mentoring, support, coaches, Corrine and Kath will talk to very much, is so integral to all of us being incredibly successful and believing in them versus ourselves sometimes. So yeah, great insights. Our next question comes from James Muscat. He's an IPA sector specialist and sales manager with us, and it's about discrimination. So Danielle, if I was you, I'd get ready. This might be for you as well, but I'll hand over to James for our next question. Thank you.
Hi, my question is for Danielle. Have you witnessed gender discrimination, and what tips do you have for those who have found themselves victims?
Thanks, James. Yes, I can answer that one. I think, firsthand, I have witnessed it in the profession that I work in, which is the legal profession. There was a report released by the Legal Services Commissioner last year, or in 2020, that recorded that, something staggering like 63% of legal professionals had been sexually harassed in the workplace. There's so much work to do in this area. But in terms of tips, I think that one of the main tips that I have is to sort of recognise first what it is, because the primary piece of legislation in this area is the Discrimination Act, and that obviously makes it unlawful to discriminate against someone according to their gender or intersex status, their marital status, whether they're pregnant, whether they're breastfeeding, all these sorts of factors. But sexual harassment is a form of gender discrimination, and I think that one comes up the most, and it doesn't necessarily involve physical contact, and I think that that's sort of an important thing to recognise, that not everyone might understand that it can sometimes not be very easy to spot it when it does occur. And so it's in the legal industry, this report that I've been referring to recorded that it's most commonly non-physical behaviour. So it, will take the form of, it can take the form of intrusive questions about your private life, or, leering and staring, unwelcome conduct really of a sexual nature. And I think one of the biggest tips is to speak up, and we're obviously seeing much more of that occur now. The media's been dominated this week by, historical sexual assault claims, etc. But, it really stood out to me when I was reading the report that was published within my sector that a lot of these cases go unreported because of this fear of being ignored, or that the harasser there'll be no consequences. And that, within law firms, usually, there is a power imbalance. And so the harasser is abusing that power, and maybe in a role of seniority, so that they might even own the company, for example. So what are the processes that they have in place, and what consequences will they incur? And, there were some quotes in there that really, this, like, for example, as this really stood out to me, there was a woman that said, as women, I think we've been conditioned to believe it just comes with the territory, and it's something that we have to put up with to an extent if we want to advance our careers. But that really saddens me, and I think that the shift there is focusing, and more people are speaking up, not only for themselves but to empower others. So the only other thing I'd say is, if you are experiencing it, you should report it to your organisation, and that organisation should have processes in place. You can also make complaints to the Australian Human Rights and Equal Opportunities Commission, with or without legal assistance, and speak to colleagues. There are counselling support lines, and also take notes, take records if this kind of conduct, if you're experiencing, because as much record keeping as possible can assist in the complaint process.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. And I agree. I think women can sometimes don't want to ruffle feathers, and to a degree sometimes conditioned. So I think your feedback there is really, really important as to what discrimination can really look like. We have a question from our audience, Danielle, and it reads, Danielle is offering some really good insights into discrimination, but I wonder her thoughts on women discrimination and any advice around this. She thinks sometimes as women we can be our own worst enemy. Having said that, she also thinks that have come forward leaps and bounds in this space, and she'd like your thoughts.
I'm on mute there, sorry. Absolutely.
2020 still haunting us.
Absolutely. I think that in my experience, women can often be quite competitive in the workplace, and we can often, discrimination can very much be from woman to woman, and this fight. Again, I think that there are power imbalance issues. There's a power dynamic there, and so my thoughts on that is very much that if you consider there to be discrimination, or there's obviously issues there, behavioural issues coming from one employer to the other, that's also something that you can report to your organisation, and it should be something that your organisation has policies in place. Good organisations should have policies in place to deal with that sort of behaviour. But I think that there's a sort of a systemic issue, and it's something that, Corrine and Kath were talking about earlier. It's just so important for us as women to champion each other and support each other. We need to make a conscious effort to do that, and to also show younger people of our generation in the workplace that it's okay to have empathy for people. It's okay to show that emotional intelligence, and to support women colleagues around us. It's not a fight against them. It's not a fight for power.
Yeah, absolutely, Danielle, and I agree. I think collaboration actually delivers on the very best, and if we support each other only greatness will come and will reduce all of the pay equity and or discrimination clauses. Corrine, I'd love your thoughts, particularly on the women supporting women in your industry and where you've come from. What's your take on that question?
Well, I chose the gentleman's game as my sport of choice from a very early age. So cricket was very, traditionally a men's game. And I guess I was exposed to those discriminatory attitudes and behaviours from a really early age. I started playing in all boys teams at age 7. And it's sort of similar to what Danielle was saying. You sort of become, you sort of accept it as a norm to be treated differently and to be taunted. The girls can't hit the ball as hard as the boys, you don't belong here, all those sorts of things that were quite regular occurrences, even at a really young age. So I think I did come to just accept it as it was. And it's only recently that I've sort of started to see how ingrained it can be in organisations. So seeing the way Cricket Tasmania runs, and especially the club cricket setup, which is often sort of run by males and is sort of stayed that way for a really long time. And I remember there was one instance last season where all the players in the Tigers team actually went to one of the board meetings and they were referring to all the rules and all the policies, and they kept saying he in all their language. And the first time the person said it, we were sort of like taken aback, like, oh, it'll be corrected. And it sort of carried on. And I think we all in that moment wish we'd spoken up and sort of acknowledged it early on, but it was afterwards that we had the conversations, and we sort of made a standard as a team then that we were going to act on those things if they happened again, because as Danielle said, we need to create some change for the next generation coming through. So I think it's a really difficult one, but it's something that we're very much aware of now and trying to change.
Yeah, look, it's thank you for sharing that, and I agree. Being in that male-dominating environment, taking the courage to talk to things that we've all just let go and assumed is an acceptable way to be referred to or as identified. Christine, a question to you, if that's okay. You're a strong advocate for all people being equal and spending many years in the public and private sectors. Can you share any of your insights on discrimination in the workplace, or better still in our society? Because if we're going to really challenge unconscious biased attitudes, it begins everywhere that we are.
Absolutely. And how long do we really have? I could talk about this
2 minutes.
Exactly. For me, hearing Danielle's comments and hearing Corrine's comments, I guess, again, it's a layering. Like, sometimes when you're exposed to discrimination and it's based on gender and you go, why me? Why are they picking on me? Why is this happening? When it's based on that, for the fact that it's the colour of your skin, it's even harder to run away from, because everybody will just point you out and treat you differently. And I've seen that in the workplace. I've seen that, I've worked in public sector for over 30 years, giving away my age, and now working in a private sector, working in my own business for the last 6 years. The sorts of things that you see, I even saw something similar the other day where a young Aboriginal woman that I mentor had turned up at work, was flustered at reception because there was a number of people there that had come in, so she was trying to assist them. And while she was assisting them, she hadn't checked in herself because she was trying to get them moved on to what they needed to do and then check in herself on an invoice system. As a result of that, her female supervisor had actually contacted her by email and said exactly that point of why didn't you check in, what's going on here, without actually saying, let's have a conversation about this. And it is an Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal situation. And so sometimes, part of that is that I don't want to step in and say to that person, this is really wrong, this is not how you supervise, it's not how you manage Aboriginal staff. But at the same time, for me, it's about empowering that individual and saying to them, this is what you need to do. You need to go and talk to them, and you need to say to them that what you're not happy about and what they could do to make it better for you. And I think that's something that we do generally in regards to, and I've got lots of non-Aboriginal friends that I do exactly the same. When they ring up and say, I'm dealing with a discriminatory issue or it's a gender-based discrimination issue, then it's about, I guess, is having that voice of reason and sitting back and saying, okay, let's unpack this. Let's talk about it. What can you do and what can't you do? And there's always, as Danielle pointed out, there's always that positioning of power. Someone has more power over somebody else. And it's about saying to that individual, while that might be the case, let's look at, sorry about that, a call coming in. Let's look at how we can change that for you, to empower that individual, and then following up with them. That particular individual, I had asked her, had she gone back? And I asked her 3 days in a row. And I said to her, do you want me to keep coming back to you? She turned around and said, no, I don't. I said, well, then I need you to act, because what's happening here is you're learning from my lesson when I started working 18, when I was 18, and the challenges that I had, I'm teaching you that now.
Absolutely, and we can fast track our youth and the people around us by taking and drawing into our own courage and our life experiences. And it takes a lot of vulnerability to say to somebody who is in a more professional position or an influencing position to say, hey, stop, this isn't working for me. Or do you know what, as the only executive in the room, I'm not taking minutes today because we're all at the same level. There's so many different things we can do to be allies to ourselves and to raise up our own self-worth. So thank you so much for your input. We're going to go to another video now to Corrine and I as we talk about Victress. We're halfway through our seminar today. Keep the questions coming and I'll revert to our video now. Thank you.
Creating space and opportunities for women in sports continues to be a big subject. This is true in the employment world as well. To give some context, there are nearly 50,000 CEOs or managing directors listed in Australia's census data. Of those 50,000 positions, only 19.3% of these are women, with most of the people aged between 40 and 60 being male. So Corrine, how do you encourage those to love your work when faced with daily bouts of discrimination?
Yeah, this is a tough one, I think, because a lot of the time it's really ingrained in the organisation. I know being in a male-dominated sport, we were always told we were never going to hit the ball as far or as hard because we didn't have the physical strength, so no one would come and watch us play. I think for me, I was lucky. I was in a team environment, so I had a group of people that I was surrounded with that had the same goal and the same purpose with the work that we were doing. We wanted to prove people wrong, and we wanted to work hard to earn that right as well. So I think surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded but challenge you as well, but have the same purpose and the same goal in mind.
Breaking into sport must have been a difficult ladder to climb. How did you get the confidence to really own that position and kickstart your career? I
think for me, I've played state cricket for 11 years, and it's only really the last 3 that I feel like I deserve to be playing with the people that I'm playing with and against. It's taken me a long time to find that inner belief, and belief is a word that gets thrown around a lot, like you could just quickly snap it, but it takes a long time to achieve, and I think it becomes easier when you start becoming aware of your own strengths and owning those. So I had some coaches that believed in me and what I could do, and I don't play the way that a lot of cricketers play. I play a lot of different shots, and a lot of the time those were frowned upon because they weren't traditional and they weren't low risk shots, and I guess people were trying to mold me into someone that I wasn't. In the last 3 years, I've had a coaching team who have allowed me to be myself and play the way I feel most confident in doing. So I think that's been massive for me to have this swell of encouragement and belief around me that I know just through training and constant practice of that, it's become way more natural.
Yeah, Corrine, running those interview questions with you was so interesting for me, because a lot of the things that you talked about in being authentic, having the courage to believe in yourself and to have the right people around you, I could really, really relate to a lot of that. And I may or may not have a decade on you, but I think it's pretty special for someone to have picked up on those qualities as early as you have. Congratulations. My question next is around gender diversity.
It's widely documented that having a gender diverse leadership team outperforms those that don't. And a Harvard Business Review told us that 48% of gender diverse teams had a higher operating margin, 42% had higher return on sales, 45% had a higher return per share. So my favourite statistic above all is a gender diverse team makes better business decisions up to 73% of the time, only because I like to fight with my husband about it. But even with these reviews, women are still fighting for equity in senior executive roles. So my question is to you, Anne. Little Real Estate are renowned for their flexible work-life balance, and 70% of your executive team identify as being female. So looking at the picture of your most recent exec meeting, which is coming up just in a second, some may conclude that you may have gone a little bit too far with flexibility. And I say that with the kindest amount of respect. So how would you respond to the naysayers, to those that believe that flexibility like this is gone too far, and what have you seen be the benefits to your business by having such a culture?
Look, at the end of the day, we want to be a workplace of choice. So we want to be able to attract the best talent. And as Danielle mentioned earlier, 9 to 5 just does not work for some people. So if we want to attract the best people and they've got to drop the kids off at school, or they want to do a gym class at 10 o'clock, or walk the dog, or whatever you've got to do actually in your day, why can't that work? So for us, it's, not around why we shouldn't do it. It's why we can't, why we wouldn't do it. And I think for us as well, if it works for our clients and it works for our team, that actually brings us a happy workforce. So we encourage our team to be flexible. We actually want them to actually have a really good work-life integration. You've got mobiles, you've got emails, you're pretty much in touch with work wherever you are. So we feel that if it's working for our team and they are in a position where they're comfortable and they're happy, we're going to benefit because they're going to thrive. So we're open to any type of flexibility that our team members would actually need.
Yeah, really progressive thought, and Little Real Estate are definitely paving the way in that, and an organisation that you should feel incredibly proud of. So well done for you to instilling some of those mentalities as well. Kath, I'd like to revert to you around, I suppose, what that looks like. You've started your own foundation, you're travelling around the country as often as you can. How has this world changed, and what's your philosophy when looking at your own business and foundation?
Very, very different to probably Anne's business and things like that. So we're sort of obviously, and it's probably not a great word, but, we're a really humble foundation that operates in 3 countries now. And it's very low touch. We rely on obviously forums and such as what we're on now, like Zooms and Google Hangouts and things like that. But we have staff in each of those countries, and we're building out education systems in schools and things like that, which has been absolutely fantastic. I think, for us, it's about keeping things pretty simple. We attract people, I guess, through a system of just being vulnerably authentic as possible. So never have I asked the person who's come on our journey or been involved in our foundation in any of the countries to be anyone that they're not. They're obviously attracted to working for us or within our organisation for many different reasons, but hopefully for the right reasons. And in interviewing them and so forth, you can sort of learn that motivation from within in each of them. Funnily enough, though, the majority of them are women, our employees in each of the countries, which has been fantastic. I think kindness leads to that. But in a lot of our board discussions recently, and I'll get onto it a little bit later when we've got a bit more time as to how Kindness Factory has evolved over time. But our mission almost now has become less about the fluffiness of kindness, which so often has this perception of being a soft skill. And I hate that word, because I think the soft skills that we often refer to are the skills that are centered around emotional intelligence. And they're actually the strong skills, right? If we were to really lean into that. We know that having a tough conversation when we're being raw, authentic, and emotionally vulnerable, they're actually really strong attributes that we have. So our mission as a collective group of women who have discussed this as well has almost become to redefine what kindness is. And for us, that's the ultimate strength. It's the ability to have a tough conversation with a person that may upset them, but it might be the thing that they need to hear to progress forward or to overcome an obstacle or to do whatever they're doing. So, hopefully that answers the question in doing so. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Kath. And I love that. In our recruiting world, we're continuously justifying soft skills over technical skills. And I won't myself go on a rampage on that because it's a bit of a bugbear for me, but I completely agree. I think, fighting the good fight, having those hard conversations, doing it with courage, with empathy, and with honesty sees the absolute best come out of other people. In my experience, and Danielle, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but in my experience, one of the biggest challenges for women is to return back to work after maternity leave. I'm a mum of 3. I think, I've sort of shared that already and really openly, and this was a consistent challenge for me. I was conditioned to feel every time I came back from maternity leave that any opportunity that came my way I needed to take, that I was really lucky that an employer would take me on board. This is how I felt. I'm not, I believe that I needed to either sacrifice my career or my babies, and it was a really hard pill for me to really swallow. My confidence was at a very low. I was desperately wanted to be hired based on my skill set, not what time I was going to get into the office or what would I do if my kids were sick. Yet no one ever asked my husband that, and he had 3 kids as well. So it was very confusing for me. And after my 3rd baby was born, Sienna, something really clicked, and my husband did give me a soft nudge and said, "Hey, Kate, go for it. Go out into that world and get the job that you want." And I was very lucky to meet Tori Best and Paul Barbara, who gave me the opportunity that I have today. So I was grateful for that, and I won't lie, in the first 6 months it was a pretty hard job. I was supported by my leader, my peers, and an incredible team. So I suppose my question in all of that long rambling is, I was so inspired and somewhat envious when I saw you launch your own career launch your own legal firm, pregnant, 8 months pregnant. And I just wanted to ask, share with us, please. There's a number of people or women on here that I'm sure are on the cusp of something really great but need that push. What is your driving force? What is your pep talk to tell us, go do it? Don't worry about the confidence. Anything's in your world.
Absolutely. I'd love to share that, Kate. I can just share a bit about my story. So I'm a lawyer, obviously, and I'm a litigator, which means we specialise in disputes and court work, etc. So when the COVID pandemic hit, I found myself, in the confines of my dining room, running multi-million-dollar litigation. We'd never done that before. We were always in the courtroom, physically with clients, etc. And the demand for the legal work increased, so I was quite busy and collaborating with, my clients and barristers and the courts in a much more fast-paced, innovative environment. And I was actually loving it. And when I look back and think, okay, well, why was it that in all of my 15-year career, why was I enjoying stage 4 restrictions in Victoria, working in my dining room? Why was that the best fun for me? And I think part of the reason was because for the first time in my career, I had full autonomy over my working conditions, and I wasn't in like the big glitzy law firm sort of under the stigma or stereotypes that sometimes I would encounter, like for example, she's the part-time mum that's not going to be here all the time, or she's the sort of younger, I still like to think of myself as young, but she's the younger lawyer that doesn't have the grey hair, and so she's not going to know as much as the grey-headed senior partner, when in actual fact, when clients would see our work, they'll love to deal with young, encouraging and positive female operators, know. So I sort of, I was loving it, and I thought, but as it worked out, I also right at the beginning of the pandemic fell pregnant but planned pregnancy with my second child, and so I found myself in a situation where my, you know, peak career opportunities were coinciding with having my second child, and I had to really think about, okay, what does this mean for me? I've worked so hard. What do I want for my future? And I thought, well, what I really want is to be able to combine my professional satisfaction and successes with my, you know, true commitment to my family. I really want a deep level of flexibility and control to be able to integrate sort of those different parts of my life. And I was like, you know what, COVID is actually presenting me with this opportunity because it's showing me firsthand that my clients are really happy with this service that I'm giving them, and I'm doing it in an innovative way, you know, being able to adapt to processes, which leads me on to the next reason why I decided to launch the firm, which was that I had sort of been recognising over the few years leading up to the pandemic that sort of the traditional law firm model, it wasn't really moving with the times, and it wasn't putting the client at the center of the service, which is and adding value to the client. And so when the pandemic hit, you know, even like with our cases, we might have 500,000 documents, you know, in any one case. And so everything had to move to electronic and, you know, digital programs and real-time management. And so the firms that hadn't adapted, they were finding it really difficult, you know, to with such a change in landscape. And I thought, well, I can actually do this. I can, more than ever before, clients want a personalised service. They want compassion in the service. They want a progressive way of doing things. And not only that, but I can have the level of flexibility that I want. So yeah, so I decided to partner with my first ever boss when I was like a cadet back in the day, and he's a male, diverse team, female male, but he was always my biggest supporter. And whereas when I was working in COVID, I realized that, you know, those stereotypes I didn't believe that I was less than but I was to some extent being bogged down by it. So that level of independence was quite empowering. And so we merged forces. So November last year, we launched the firm, and and then I gave birth to my baby Leo in December. And now 3 months on, we're a team of 5, but we're males and females. But we, you know, our staff are telling us that level of flexibility that can work anytime comes, you know, 8 o'clock at night, and we are all just on. And we're just finding that the level of efficiency is just incredible, and our clients are happier than ever before, and we're all feeling empowered because we're able to achieve what we want in our life, which is, you know, to integrate all of these parts. And so my biggest message would be is just to, you know, follow your instinct, know that you can do it, and also seize the opportunity. I think with changing landscape now, that you can work, you know, from anywhere at any time, and let's do this.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, look, let's do this. I think that's fantastic, Danielle. Now, you've talked about little Leo. We've got a little picture of him, if you don't mind. How is he going?
He's awesome. Like last week, we had our first giggles and smiles, and there's nothing better than that. So he's doing very well. Thank you for featuring him.
Oh no, that's fine. And look, as I said, envious in all the right ways that you took the launch. And as I said to Corrine before, I am a couple of years older than you and a couple of bubbies ahead of you. So I take great pride to see women taking the launch and not being bugged down by that conditional thinking and that lack of worth, when we know that we're very capable of doing what it is that we do so well. So congratulations, Danielle, you are absolutely an inspiration. Our next question is all about success, and looking across this panel, you've all got buckets of it. So I'm going to revert to Bridget Stevenson, who is the lead at IPA in Brisbane, for our next question.
I have a question on the subject of success. Advice I hear a lot right now for those who are hungry and wanting to excel at the beginning of their career is reality minus expectation. So do you feel like expectations, whether they're influenced by social media or family life, offer an unfair presumption for what's actually achievable for a young woman today?
Corrine, I might revert to you if that's okay, given your experience in the limelight and cricketing. Has social media played a significant role for you or your family life in what you really are able to achieve and what reality looks like versus your expectation?
Yeah, absolutely it has. I think with the younger generation coming through now, that they have the opportunity to come out of school straight away and into a full career in sport, that pressure is just going to increase and increase with the exposure of all the different mediums on social media platforms, and even the exposure through the broadcast of our games. We've got players that are 15 and 16 playing in the competition, and it's a really delicate age where you're trying to understand who you are as a young woman and figure out your own identity, and to have all of that pressure from strangers, from people you know, from yourself, from the angle of performance as well is a huge weight to carry. And I think for the older generation that have just experienced the semi-professionalism of the game, there's different pressures and expectations as well. You're required to perform more and more often, but you're also required to be a mother, a sister, a daughter. You're required to supplement your income by holding up another job and thinking about your career after sport as well, and trying to put building blocks in place to make that transition a healthy one. So there's pressures from all angles, but I think the financial pressure at the minute of sort of having a full-time job, but not being able to completely commit everything you have to that, and trying to fulfill your potential in that with also balancing your life and trying to plan for your life after your sport. So I do think social media has a lot to play, but I think that financial pressure is huge as well, and I think it takes its toll on athletes in their mental health and well-being off the field too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fast-paced world, and I agree. And you're somebody that I know who's personally taken herself off social media because I suppose the reality didn't really meet the expectation. What's your advice to some of our audience who are out there thinking, geez, their job's better, their life's better, they look grander? What's your advice to managing reality versus expectation?
I have switched back onto Instagram, just FYI.
You could have waited till tomorrow.
All about being honest. I guess the big thing for me was you fall into a trap. Like, what you post is your child with the perfectly brushed hair and the perfectly perfect outfit on. But within 5 minutes or before or after the photo, your child's got food all over them, their hair's a mess. But I'm not posting that photo on Facebook. I want people to think that I've got my life in control. Now, you know that about yourself, yet you post it. So when you see other people doing, you think, oh God, they've always the perfect family, or they've got the perfect job, or they've got the perfect this. It does just add that whole layer of pressure of you're not good enough. Why doesn't your child look like this 24/7? Why don't you have this in your career? Like, it's just too much pressure.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you just have to be happy with yourself, the people around you, your family, and that should be enough for you to feel good about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to stick in your own lane, and perception certainly is not necessary reality. Kat, a question to you around this, and I think it's the same. I think people would look at you and say, hey, she's done plenty from her sporting world to her foundation. It's all of this glamour are all around the country, and all of these sort of tight perceptions. All of this comes with a significant amount of hard work. You just don't get here for the fun of it. So what's your take on reality versus expectation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny question, because I sort of giggled when you just said that, because I guess my own perception of myself is not that I'm hugely successful. I'm just happy. So maybe the question back to this panel is, how do we define success, and is there a rule book around this? So my idea of success is going to be completely different to yours, Kate, versus Corinne's or Danielle's, or anyone on this call for that matter. And something that I've become quite passionate about is children, and we've now launched a curriculum into 2 countries and soon to be 3 that focuses on 12 attributes of kindness. And along that journey, I went into a lot of school systems and focused predominantly on sort of 12 to 18-year-olds, men, so boys and girls, men and women. And it was really interesting. Of all the Q&A, obviously my life story touches on lots of different topics, be it suicide prevention, mental health, disability, all those sorts of things. And at the end of it, they'd come up to me, and I'd like to consider myself as a pretty relatable person and down to earth and all that kind of stuff. So it was really nice to have those kids come up to me, but they were almost like, how do I do what you've done? And I was like, well, what have I done? Tell me what I've done. And they're like, you're so successful, and et cetera, et cetera. And I sort of had to have that pinch yourself moment where I was like, when I was their age, my idea of success was playing cricket for my country. I'm the happiest I've ever been. I'm not doing that. And if you were to ask me a question, if I could package up my life and go back to prior to breaking my back, where I could still play cricket and hit a ball around a park, or I could take the life that I've had, I'd definitely choose the one that I've had. So how have I created this success? I still don't know the answer. I just followed my passion. And that's what I tell the kids. I just sort of say to them, look, I think in all areas, life doesn't need to be dictated by financial success or a certain number or whatever that may look like, or the fact that you're in a loving relationship, or a mother or a father, or whatever it is that you're doing. Define your own success first. Maybe have that soul searching moment where you look at yourself internally and go, what does success or happiness look like to me? And then create that path, rather than looking at our idols. And they certainly play a great influence in our life, friends, family, whatever that is. But just because mum was a lawyer doesn't mean that I have to be one. Maybe my idea of success is just being a mum, or not just, but being a mum. And I think that's really important. And that's probably the important point that I've noticed, I think, in talking to lots of different kids and adults and things like that, who are daring to dream or trying to find that idea of success. But that's, yeah, I think if we haven't figured that out yet, maybe it's time to dive deep and figure out that idea of success within ourselves.
Yeah, Kath, I love that. Yeah, I love that. Christina and I were actually having a chat yesterday, and watch out world, because we're thinking about putting something together around happiness, because it stems just from there. What your ideal of success is really what makes your health and comfortability sitting there. But Christina, I'll stick with you if you don't mind. If we were to take this question into the workforce, and with your couple of decades experience, in your opinion, how can employers set up people for success so reality actually does closely align to their expectations?
Before I answer that, I'll just comment on, again, working with Aboriginal businesses. What's been interesting there is we actually had a conversation the other day, a group of business coaches, around what is success, because we were asked about KPIs. And so part of that was, well, you know what, one person, and I'm hearing it here, the stuff that Kath said, Corinne said, even Danielle has mentioned it as well. I mean, everybody on the panel has. And that is, success, we shouldn't be trying to keep up with the Joneses. We should really be looking at what makes us happy, and that becomes our success. We don't all need to live in the most affluent suburbs in our society, or we don't need to have the biggest yacht or jewelry or whatever that is. Really it is, and I think COVID has actually taught us something, if nothing else, and I've seen it so much with people that I work with, is that COVID's actually allowed us to reset, to stop and reset. While some people are going, oh, this is awful, this has happened to us. Yes, it is awful and it has happened to us, but it's about how we become resilient and how we bounce back from that. And I'm hearing that here and feeling really, because you're not part of the group that I normally work with or talk to. And so it's really good to hear that sort of conversation's happening elsewhere. So to respond to your initial question, understanding your workforce, I think doesn't matter who the employer is, it's about understanding your workforce. And we're hearing, Anne making comments in relation to that. Understand, undertake training. And I think people need to be humble about that. If you're an employer or you're in a position of power within an organisation, undertake training to be better skilled and knowledgeable about the people that are working with you. And I guess I'm coming at that from that Aboriginal perspective, that some organisations say, look, we're looking to take Aboriginal people on board, and this can apply to any diverse group. And as part of that process, what we need to look at is, do we really understand what are the, what different people are, now I'm coming unstuck.
No, I can have different motivators and different
Exactly,
experiences.
that's where I was
got
going.
you.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly where I was going. So we're motivated by different things. We talk about success, but we're motivated even, from and influenced by culture, by our abilities, and a whole range of things. And so if you want to get the best, that's great to hear what Anne's saying. If you want to get the best out of your workforce, understand who they are, understand what motivates them. And if you can create a flexible workplace, that's fantastic. But it's also about, we as employers need to be a little bit humble too. Don't think we have the answer to everything. So valuing, for me, it is about diversity. I think diversity brings so much more to the workplace and enriches the workplace. And I'm always pushing for, Aboriginal participation in the workplace. So valuing what diversity can bring to your workplace. And for some people, it's, you don't know what you don't know. And so if I can bring, for me in that space, it is about women and young girls, but if I can bring Aboriginal people into your workplace that are actually going to add value, and you don't know what value they're offering until you bring them in and you create a workforce that's going to allow them to become creative. So yeah, for me, it sort of brings everything together from what we've been talking about today, but also, when you talk about the little space I play in, absolutely, you create a workplace that people can feel part of and that they're valued, that whole inclusion stuff is happening, then you're going to have a much richer response. I just will finish on one comment. I also run training around building cultural capability. And one of the things that I always say to people, and I've taken this from, I think, MasterCard, and that is, if everyone's seen that ad, it's about that whole thing of, you can buy this and you can buy that and have a wonderful experience. And I say to people that, when I come into your company or come into your training room, your employer has given you an opportunity to understand and to work with Aboriginal people. What I'm going to do is give you the skills to do that. And what your employer has actually given you as part of this is a priceless gift that you may not realise today. And I don't want to be like Corrine. I get a little bit emotional about things like this too. I heard it in her voice earlier. And it is about, some things are priceless and you cannot put a price on them. And being able to change someone else's life for the better, that is gold.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
my last comment.
Yeah, absolutely, Christine. I think you are an advocate, and all of the panel is knowledge is power, and the more that we can build our knowledge up, the more our confidence is, and the more that we can be allies to our own personal requirements rather than the whole country. So I think that's a really powerful statement. We've got another question, and it's reverting back to Victress, the book. Corrine and Kathy, you were highlighted in that book as well. So I'm going to revert to both of you here. There are a number of consistent attributes that I saw in each of the athletes that you highlighted, Corrine. Resilience is one, determination, hard work and grit, not to mention all 100 of the people you highlighted had significant talent, so that helps as well. But one attribute that really stood out to me was kindness, and I know we talked about it a little bit, but Kath, tell us, how can we insert kindness? I know you talked to 12 sort of pillars of kindness just before, but how can we as individuals and Australian citizens insert kindness into our day-to-day acts?
I guess the number one thing, whenever we get on a plane, and I know that we haven't been doing too much of that given COVID interrupting our lives, but whenever we get on there, the first safety message that everyone alerts us to is to put our own oxygen mask on first before helping others. So I think that's a really good analogy to start with. So what is self-kindness? To me, it looks different to you and to everyone else, but it might be to go for a walk or to pat your dog or to get the coffee or to kiss your partner or whatever that looks like for you. What is that thing that's going to allow you to then give others kindness? Because I think we can all agree that the world needs a lot more of it. So self-kindness, identify what that looks like to you first as the number one point. And then secondly, what are you doing for others? It doesn't have to cost you a cent. So Kindness Factory was started on the premise where I recognised, after overcoming some pretty significant life hurdles, that my life was actually saved by kindness. So the kindness of strangers, as I mentioned earlier with the lift example, but also friends and family who just never allowed me to give up. And that was through lots of tough conversations that I needed to hear. So that ultimate kindness, strength kind of stuff, but also just the incremental things that people were doing for me on a day-to-day basis. For example, smiling at me when I was struggling to walk or something like that made the biggest difference. So my life then turned from that, I guess, that living example of experiencing a lot of kindness from others to giving some to myself, identifying what it was that I needed to pursue what I wanted to do next, which was to start Kindness Factory Global, which has been fantastic. So then it was more about what am I now doing for others? And so we started to, I guess, snowball on that, tried to register 1 million acts of kindness. That's been hit. We're nearly at 2 million. And then we've grown into a curriculum. How that happened, and it's a very apt story for this. I was getting flown around the world to tell my story, which was really exciting. And it's funny because when we talk about self-belief, my English teacher and I caught up for a coffee very recently, and she laughed because she actually failed me in my Year 12 English oral exam. So she was quite amazed to see me speaking at the Opera House in the audience in front of thousands of people, given that she'd given me that big F. So I guess self-belief has been an important theme within my life. But I was getting flown around the world as a motivational speaker, and I got the business class treatment, all that kind of stuff. And I was flown to this meeting in New York in front of a man, like high-powered businessman, one of the biggest companies in the world. And his executive had flown me there. And I got into this thing, and I just assumed that it was going to be a company-wide sort of speaking engagement, and it was just a one-on-one with the CEO of this company. And I got there and I sat across from him, and the executive said, "This is my boss, this is Cash, he's got a great story, go on, Kath, tell him." So I spent the next 45 minutes going through my life story of inspiration and ups and downs and roller coasters. And he said, "Well, that's really great." He shook my hand and sort of showed me the door, and I sort of had that scratch your head moment. What on earth have I just flown across the other side of the world, wasted all this time? Yes, sure, I got paid and all that kind of stuff, but this is not why I pursued this career. It was to, I guess, create change and to see more kindness in the world as a living proof of what it could do and how powerful it could be. So I made a deal with myself. I said, for every corporate engagement I do, I'm going to do one in a school environment that can hopefully see kids spread this message for me and create a generational change whereby kids are taught this in a school environment by me going in and sharing a keynote with them, for example. And when I did that, I learnt two things. My life's been touched by suicide. I lost my partner back in 2012 to that, and that was one of my hurdles. And when I'd go into these environments, two things would happen. Kids would reach out to me and sort of share more of their story. When we share our own adversities or stories, people want to share them back, which is fantastic. But teachers would chase me into the car park and they'd say to me, "Look, you just created this amazing legacy where kids want to be better to each other. What could you leave us with as educators who see these kids every day that we could continue the legacy that you've created, because you can't come back tomorrow?" So we partnered with a global education provider called Kaplan, and together we worked together to come up with 12 attributes of kindness. And I think they're really going to identify what that ultimate strength looks like. So they're things like we've already referred to. It's humility, it's collaboration, it's trust, it's honesty, it's empathy, it's compassion, you name it, like, within those 12. But they also lead into well-being, resilience, strategies, all those sorts of things. So I think back to the question is, how do we get it in our day-to-day life? Live it. So kindness to self first, then kindness to others. If we really want to, I guess, dive deeper into it, you can explore the curriculum. There's adult-based curriculum stuff coming as well, which has been fantastic. We're working with organisations like AMP and CommBank and people like that to really expand that into cultural awareness for lots of different organisations where adults can, I guess, learn these, and I'm not going to call them these strong skills that we've been referring to for the entire call as well. So I think that's how you get it in your life. You do it. We always refer to, and we've got a hashtag, and it's one small act. And I think it's basically a philosophy that lends to one small act can lead to a really big change. So you start with something as small as smiling at a stranger, not knowing how that could impact their day, could save their life potentially. So I don't think any act is too small. And I think that we just need to start doing it, living it, breathing it, embracing it, and having it as an integral part of our life as well.
Yeah, incredible message, Kath, and I completely agree. Our division here at Diversity have a similar motto. We talk about make small change today, however we influence and advocate for great change tomorrow, and it's something that our team really lives by. So very similar mantle, just said quite differently. Corrine, you wrote Victress book. It's a brilliant, I'm not a sports lover previously, but now I've got 100 women that I know everything about their lives. In your book, everyone tells you about kindness and what their philosophy is on kindness. From that, how did that change your world when you sat down with these inspirational women and really got to understand what kindness meant to them?
Yeah, that was actually probably my favourite part of creating Victress was we got a small quote off every athlete on how kindness had affected their life or how they viewed kindness, and proceeds of the book go towards a kindness factory. So we really want kindness intertwined throughout the book, and it was really eye-opening to see different perspectives on it, and to what Kath was just speaking about in terms of self-kindness. Lisa Jones was huge on that. She's a Beyond Blue, a mental health advocate, and she's been through her own struggles, which she's publicly spoken about, and she talks about having to have that sense of kindness to yourself before you can pass it on in a meaningful way. And someone like Lauren Jackson said kindness should be intertwined in every part of society's problems, and everything would be a lot easier to deal with. So it was really enlightening to see how kindness had affected those people who we see as really successful people. And it could be as simple as one of their coaches giving up their time, outside of training hours to invest in their development, and how much of an impact that has had on them, and how they still remember that as being some of their fondest memories of their careers. So as Kath was saying, I just think kindness is a way of being. It should be an unconscious thought to do something good for someone else. And she's definitely Kath's been a huge example of that, and has sort of just let me be my authentic self and given me permission to, instead of just think about helping someone, acting on it. So yeah, it's completely changed the way I act day to day.
Yeah, I think it's a choice. It's absolutely a choice to be kind, and then I imagine that it's actually contagious. So I will continue to smile at strangers in the street and do my part as best as I can. Thank you all to the panel. Today's theme for International Women's Day is to choose to challenge, and today we have done exactly that through conversation, through leadership, and through education. And we've all played a part in this just by being here, and I'm incredibly grateful to have this platform and audience. A huge thank you to Corrine Hall, who is the inspiration for today's event. Her book Victress will be in all of our gift packs for all of you who are attending today. So I look forward to sharing and spreading her word. A huge shout out, geez, that was hard for me. A huge shout out to the panel, Kath, Christine, Danielle and Anne too. Before the next video starts and rolls by, I thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion, and if you're not sure, I choose to challenge.
So thanks everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. To Corrine, Christine, Danielle, Kath and Anne, thank you. Thanks for attending. Thanks for being so informative and engaging. And of course, to my National Manager of Diversity and Inclusion, Kate Baxter, who was so passionate about bringing this forum together many months ago. And I think you'll all agree, it's been a really good event, something that we can all be extremely proud of. Keep visiting ipa.com.au. We will keep providing updates in terms of our diversity and inclusion platform. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.